I'm Neil McEvoy. I'm leader of Propel, a brand new political party in Wales. We're in Monmouthshire Square, and this is the offices of Deryn, who are quite an interesting company when it comes to Welsh politics.
Right, so what's your experience been with these people? And I think it might even help, Neil, if you can tell us a bit about your political trajectory through the Senedd here.
Yeah, I initially started off in the Labour Party until the Iraq War. I left the Labour Party, I joined Plaid Cymru, the so-called Party of Wales. Went through the ranks, was deputy leader of Cardiff Council. Some controversies at times. I suppose really getting used to upsetting people by bringing in change, really. I was elected to the Senedd in 2016, and as soon as I got in the Senedd, as soon as I got elected, I was told in no uncertain terms that awkward questions were out. Do as you were told. You have a job for life, £70,000 a year. Don't rock the boat. The Senedd is run by the Welsh Parliament, by the Labour Party and Plaid Cymru. It seems that it always has been. Plaid was supposed to be in opposition, but they were tied together really by this very interesting organisation here called Deryn. And they were talking about, back in 2016, the Progressive Alliance of Plaid Cymru and the Labour Party, which is anything but progressive.
OK, so what evidence have you got that Deryn have got these close links to both parties?
Well, the director of Deryn, one of the directors, was vice chair of Plaid Cymru. And when there was a budget deal between the Labour Party and Plaid Cymru, it just so happens that one of the clients of Deryn did very, very well from that budget deal, ACT. The budget deal involved apprenticeships, mainly. And that company, one of their clients, did very, very well from that deal. So in effect there, you had a political party doing a deal with the governing party worth millions upon millions, and one of the clients of a leading politician, former politician in that party, their client did really, really well. Nothing was declared. There were no interest declared at all. And it carries on like that. 2016, I started asking questions about an Ofcom contract where they regulate competition in that sector. And Deryn got the contract, and it turned out that only Deryn were allowed to apply for it. And two of the Deryn directors were also on the Ofcom advisory board, and so on and so forth. Plaid Cymru were assisted in the election campaign, as ever, by Deryn. I'm not sure whether they declared that assistance in terms of in-kind assistance in preparing for things like question time. And the influence that this company has over the leading party and also Plaid Cymru is quite extraordinary.
Well, you've said that, but how about some more evidence about links with Labour? Obviously, lots of links with Plaid.
Of course, yeah. I mean, the other director was a former advisor to Carwyn Jones. So therefore, what you have a marrying up of the...
So who's he? Sorry.
She. Cathy Owens. And what is really interesting as well, when I was asking questions, I was being told not to ask questions, by the way, about how they were doing business.
Why?
Plaid Cymru. I mean, I was in the leader's office being told in no uncertain terms to stop asking questions, to let the Ofcom contract go by the wayside, to stop asking why one of their clients got £113 million off the Welsh Government, stop asking about that. And ultimately, I was expelled from Plaid Cymru, and I would say at the behest of this company here. That's my impression. Complaints were organised about me. And they were put forward by both directors, actually.
Well, I mean, if Deryn were out here, if they would dare to come out and talk to us, they would probably tell us that actually they're just very good at their job. That's why they've got both main political parties in Wales working with them.
Absolutely. So what I'm calling for, and I have been calling for a number of years now, are controls on lobbyists in Wales. There are no controls. In Westminster, at least, there are some rules for lobbyists. Here there are none. You don't know who they've met, you don't know why they've met them, you don't know who's paying them. So if you're a business and you want to get to the front of the queue, you want to change government policy, go pay a lobbying firm. It's not right.
OK, so just tell us the sort of things that go on inside these offices. They won't let us in. Give us from your experience, what kind of stuff goes on in here?
It probably doesn't go on in there. I mean, when Carwyn Jones, when the death of Carl Sargent, who committed suicide, when his death was announced, Carwyn Jones made a quick call to his father, the First Minister, and his second call was to a director, I think, or an employee, certainly consultant of this firm, Deryn. So a lot of the stuff, you won't see what goes on. It's behind closed doors, backroom deals. Yeah, of course they're doing their job, but that doesn't make it right in a democratic society.
Okay, so what objections have you specifically got to Deryn? Do you think that how to change the rules to make things better with these communications, these private communications?
Yeah.
Effectively, what they are is a very central in Welsh politics PR firm.
Yeah, they tie together the so-called Progressive Alliance, which is not very, very progressive, but they deal with all parties, really. Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, they're all the same. I think that's my main experience over the last 5 years. That was the evidence that I observed.
But how to change things? What's the best way to change things?
We need rules. We need rules in place. If you are a lobbying firm, you should declare who you're representing. You should declare what the contract you have is, how much you've been paid, what is the purpose of any meeting, what's the purpose of any call. We need regulation in this sector because as it stands now, there are too many shadows. Too much goes on without people knowing, and we need transparency. And to be frank, just because you have a load of money, I don't think it's right that you go to the front of the queue and have access to government ministers as they have right now. It's simply not right.
Now, you're talking about, what you're alleging is that they've been advising the political party, in this case, Plaid Cymru, about people like your expulsion. Have you actually got any evidence for that?
Yeah, they very kindly wrote complaints about me to Plaid Cymru, alleging that I was, I suppose, really interfering in their business by asking questions. So they wanted me out of the way,
Isn't that what politicians are supposed to do?
Not in Cardiff Bay. I think what my experience of politics, it's why a load of us had formed Propel, brand new party, members in every constituency in Wales. Our experience is that, we touched on it earlier, those of us that want to ask questions, those of us that want transparency, get weeded out by the system. We get smeared by the BBC. We get smeared by other media companies, Wales Online, for example. I mean, I was in the amazing situation where I was supporting a child alleged abuse in care, and yet it was me who was suspended.
Well, this I do find surprising that the big media organisations such as what used to be HTV, ITV Wales, and the BBC. What's been their role?
ITV is slightly better, to be honest. The BBC is rotten to the core. I never thought that I would be in favour of abolishing the licence. I am. I see no value there.
Yeah, but why?
It's a propaganda organisation for the establishment. I don't call them mainstream. They're establishment media. So the established media are there to maintain control, maintain the status quo, and stop people like me and others asking questions and getting answers.
What's been your experience directly with the BBC then?
Well, I mean, it's quite staggering. I'll give you another example. Let's stick on the child abuse one. A child is alleged abuse in care over a sustained period. And all the BBC were interested in doing is calling me a bully, saying that I bullied a care worker in the care home of the private company. And yet the person who the child says abused it was that person that started the complaint. That was never made public. The voice of the child was lost. And in my opinion, in my personal opinion, I believe the child was abused and the abuse probably continues. As a result of these guys.
Well, the BBC would say it's not a job for you, Neil, it's a job for the police.
Well, it's interesting you say that because my problem at the time was that the police didn't investigate properly. They turned up some very difficult children in the home, and a whistleblower came to me as well, a former resident of the same home who named the same care worker as having abused him as well. We did put a statement through to the police, but unfortunately, the individual then withdrew his statement. Somebody had a word with him, and I understand why he did it. He didn't feel that it was in his best interest to go forward with a complaint against the individual in the private company. But the police then looked at the case that I was complaining about. They admitted they hadn't really investigated it properly. So then 2 years later, they reinvestigated and said there was nothing to look at. I have no faith in it. No faith at all.
But you see, at that point, actually, the BBC in the past would have picked up the story and said, well, hang on, this looks like it could be a miscarriage of justice.
They've no interest. I mean, Tony was stood a mile from where plutonium, mud, this is crazy, yeah? Mud laced with plutonium, okay, was dumped, 80,000 tonnes of it in the water, 1 mile outside of Cardiff. Our coast is now radioactive, according to tests.
I noticed, actually, they've stopped dumping it this side and they're dumping it back next to Portishead again.
They are. But we proved, we had documentation to prove that plutonium had leaked into the estuary for decades. For decades, and they stopped testing in 1984 because the testing was that bad. I'm smiling because I'm not sure what else to do. The BBC barely covered it. That should have been on every news channel. They've dumped mud with plutonium in it.
Yeah, because they are basically almost like the last court of appeal, or they should be, for anything that goes wrong in the system. Anyway, look, we're here talking about politics, not just about this particular communications firm. So I think it'd be nice to go, let's take a 5-minute walk over to the Senedd now and talk about how these people have actually affected the way Wales is run.
Yeah. My former place of work, which I'm no longer in, thankfully. But we'll be back. We're outside the Senedd, the Parliament for Wales, it used to be Cardiff Docks, but it's called Cardiff Bay now.
OK, no mud being dumped here, no barrage?
Well, the mud was dumped probably 3/4 of a mile over that way.
OK. Look, this is what it's all about, though, isn't it? Because people, when they vote every 4 years... This is what they're hoping is going to make the right decisions for them. Just give us an idea of the sort of budgets that we're dealing with here. This is public money, taxpayers' money, that these people are deciding how it's spent. Yeah,
£17 billion goes through this building every single year.
And how does that work? How is it decided how it's spent?
Well, the budget is decided every year by the government. The opposition parties will always support the government when they don't have a majority, bizarrely. That's the way that it works in there because it's a club. They drink together, they eat together, they socialise together, and there are no real differences in politics in that building.
Now, you can say that because you've been in both main parties.
Yeah.
OK, so give us an idea of one of the decisions that's been made about money in here that you've witnessed that has actually involved collusion between the main parties.
Every budget. I mean, every single budget.
But it's easy to say that, but something specific that people may know, a specific project, a specific building, a hospital, something that's been decided in there with collusion from both sides.
It's policies in general, Tony. I mean, stopping working class people buying their own council house that they've rented for years and finally got enough money to pay a deposit and buy it. That's been stopped by collusion in there. The publishing the papers of all the papers around the scandal of Carl Sargent, Plaid Cymru, Labour, they all got together in there to stop those papers being published.
Just tell us about that particular case. For those that don't know who Carl Sargent is.
Carl Sargent was a high-level Labour politician, a government minister who was either going to challenge to be the leader and possible First Minister, or more likely was going to organise the next person to step in after the former First Minister. So clearly he had to go, I suppose, in political terms anyway, and a load of complaints were made, and the Labour Party had very dirty hands on the complaints. Plaid Cymru had equally dirty hands on the complaints. Other people were involved, and ultimately, what happened has never become public. Those that, in my opinion, made up the complaints have never been named. Many of us know who they are. And those parties got together to make sure that the papers and exactly what went on in the suicide of that individual were never published.
Now, I find that pretty shocking, because this is supposed to be a public body with public records of everything.
Yeah. I mean, what may shock people out there as well is that there's a thing called the business committee in there. Thanks to me, the minutes are now published. They never used to be. And on the business committee, as it was from 2016 on, Labour, Plaid Cymru, the Liberal Democrats always got together and decided what went on the agenda. So sometimes I wanted things on the agenda. I couldn't even get them on the agenda. I mean, bizarrely, I remember, I was the first person to use the Government of Wales Act to compel the government to publish documents. And that went to one vote. But when I brought it back again, and it looked as if we could actually win the votes, it was kept off the agenda. Now,
what you're describing is the way that the executive of a private business operates.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Are the public actually allowed into these meetings, physically? And if they are, what's the point if the papers aren't published?
As an elected member, I wasn't even allowed to go to the business committee meetings. It's behind closed doors. That's where things are sorted out. And what you see in the chamber then is theatre. It's a charade. And I was quite often, over the 5 years, having my microphone turned off, being able to ask questions. And what we have here, it's a private club in Wales. It's a parish council of a bunch of friends almost who get together, spend our money, drink together, socialise together, and then out there you have a bit of theatre to pretend there's some differences when actually the differences are minute. Absolutely minute.
OK, so we were just at Deryn, this communications company. What's their presence here? Do they have physical offices here? What is their presence inside the building?
You see them walking around sometimes with politicians. They'll host events, but a lot of the conversations they'll have will be private conversations. People will go out for drinks in the bars around here. Receptions. I never went to those receptions. I never drank with those people, and I certainly didn't go to parties that I could have gone to.
Now, I know you've been through both the main parties here, both Labour and Plaid Cymru. Have you now decided that you want to set your own party up? Now, is it just you?
No, God, no. We've got councillors all over Wales. We've got members in every single Welsh constituency. We've only been going 11 months. We're getting some traction. You know, we're essentially... We held a brilliant meeting on Monday for it's a convention now. A convention for Wales, for the Welsh Constitution. And, I mean, it was really exciting to see just people, working class people, coming together, talking about what was wrong with the system, how they felt disenfranchised, how they were all the bloody same, as we're saying, and coming together just talking about what kind of country we want, what rights we want, freedom of speech, like the American Constitution, where you've got the First Amendment. I want that in Wales. And so we held the first Welsh convention on Monday evening, and we're going to go forward all over Wales now, have these meetings, discuss from the grassroots up what Wales we want. You know, these turkeys in here, they'll never vote for their Christmas. But what we want to do out there is build, and we're doing it, a grassroots movement, many, many conversations, and we want to change our country.
OK, it's called Propel.
Propel.
What about other people who have been involved in politics here in Wales, Neil, and they've also found that it's not for them? Have you found that you've attracted some of those?
I think we've mainly attracted people who have never been involved in politics before. I mean, more than 50% of you guys out there don't vote. Because I don't blame you, okay? If I lived in England, who could I support? I have no idea. So in Wales, it was the election, it was the Westminster election. There was no one to vote for. I actually spoilt my ballot paper. And we then decided we had to form a party. And we've put together Propel. And we're going from strength to strength.
OK, well, so how do you see Propel changing Wales, say, in 5 years' time?
I think we're even a longer-term project, really. We've got members joining under 20. Really, really exciting. The general demographic seems to be... A lot of young women in their 30s, actually, have joined Propel. And we will stand for election, the council elections in May. We're realistic about what we can achieve there, first time around. And I think, going forward, we're definitely going to be a force in the next Senedd elections in 2026. I think we'll get a few of us elected then. We'll have a group then, and then we can move on. So we're looking at 10 years at the future. OK.
What do you make of the difference between Holyrood, the Senedd and Westminster? Is it really a United Kingdom anymore?
No, clearly not. it's going to be strange coming from me, but I think I'll defend Westminster here. It's a real parliament. For me, I think there are rules. They're generally followed, I'd say. Lobbying, for example, the Conservative MP had to resign because he was seen to have broken the rules. In Wales, we have no rules, so nobody ever resigns and on lobbying. And Scotland, I think they were going ahead, but I mean, it's amazing how quickly the SNP has been derailed by the establishment. And this building here, it's barely a parliament. I mean, they make up the rules as they go along. They don't let you speak. They won't let you put things on the agenda. They invent complaints, and you go through a whole complaints process, tying up your time, taking you away from the real politics you should be doing. That was my experience. And now, by not being in here, it's, I'd say, a liberation almost, because I'm not having to go to that building over there every week almost and sit in front of a standards commissioner or standards committee and answer questions about pretty good behaviour, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly seems to me you're one of the last honest politicians left in this country.
There are a lot. I think there are a lot of us out there, and what is exciting is there are going to be a lot more of us in places like this as we go along.
Okay, how do people find Propel? What's the best way to follow what you're doing?
www.propel.wales, and that's where we are. And we didn't have a manifesto, we had a contract with Wales, because contracts you sign up to and you have to fulfil them. And that's what it's all about. Not making promises you can't deliver, but making promises of what you can do. And that's what we're about.
Okay, Neil, thanks very much.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.